Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to Searching for Political Identity. I was going to start this episode, this intro, by recapping how I got here, hosting this podcast, and where I'm at. But we kind of covered that in the conversation that you're about to hear, so I won't do that. I'll just say, um, going back to when I was a little kid, I was always very creative, very high energy, but I did hit a period when it's called puberty, when I got very depressed for way too long, for like 20 years, and I stifled my creative energy, stuff that makes me a little different, and I wish I hadn't done that, but I did, and it's okay because I'm in a really great time in my life right now. I'm 35 years old. I'm licensed to practice law in California. I've got a great podcast. I've got an amazing girlfriend who I'm very serious with. I got a dog. Every relationships are just looking up. So it's just amazing. But it hasn't been a simple road. And I think the point is that I suppressed a lot of my personality. And so the search for political identity is really a search for identity in general. It has to do a lot with coming out of this depression, frankly. Who am I? What do I want to be all about? That's what I wanted to add. Everything else in terms of, the last 6 or 7 years of my political journey, we did basically talk about. It was a great conversation. Brianna Wu, if you don't know, is a trans woman. She is very active politically on the left. She is very intelligent, very informed, got clear opinions. I mean, she's such a good writer. I don't mean to repeat what she and I talked about, but you have to be really sharp to be a good writer, don't you? Not only sharp, but you have to know what you're talking about. You have to have a clear worldview, and she has that. So it's exactly the kind of person I hope to attract when I started hosting this thing. And so I did. It was a great conversation. And Brianna, I appreciate you. We talked a fair amount about the trans issue, of course, trans policy. And you can almost tie that into what's wrong with the Democratic Party. We also talked about that. And then basically the other theme I wrote down is, am I spending too much time on X? Because she kind of respectfully said, Brian, you're spending too much time on X. So good conversation about the political landscape, Trump, Elon Musk, and all that sort of stuff, Israel, anti-Semitism. Solid conversation. Brianna, thank you very much. And thank you all for joining me. And without further ado, I will let that ride and see you a week from today. Who do I have next week? Can I just tell you real quick who I have next week? Next week, I have Dr. Rechtenwald, Dr. Michael Rechtenwald, runner-up Libertarian presidential nominee this past year, prolific author, vocal guy. It'll actually be a really good counterpoint to this conversation. So this is good for you to know. Thank you all. See you later. Bye. Brianna Wu, thank you so much for joining me.
We had some trouble. We had some trouble setting a time, but your schedule, we figured it out. Figured my schedule out, and then boom, now
So
we're
grateful.
here. It's magic.
I appreciate it because, as you know from our Twitter interactions, or X interactions, I am searching for political identity. That means I'm trying to
Yes.
trying to host people who have clear thoughts and clear worldviews, and you seem to have that.
Do you
So,
think so?
well, do
Really?
you?
I don't know. I feel like I feel like one of the ways I've I kind of de-emphasize what I personally want just with the nature of my job. And I think a lot about public policy and what the best policy is for the country. Sometimes that's good for me, sometimes it's bad. But I think rather than an identity I personally hold, I think about what the direction the country needs to go legislatively, if that makes difference. Because that's really different, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Well, yeah. So I guess we got to find out both. What are your views, and where do they? How could you? What is the difference there in terms of what's best for the country? So let me start by getting your story a little bit, if I may, because
Yeah,
I
let's do
really
it.
don't know much about you other than I think you're fairly prolific. I will use that word on X.
Prolific?
Yes,
Yes,
I think you're a
okay.
very good writer. I think you
Thank
have a
you.
yeah, no, and so you can't write well unless you have something to say. So I do believe you have something to say. So what is your background? I know something Gamergate. I'm supposed to ask you
Oh
about Gamergate.
God!
I
Do
don't
you
know.
want to go over Gamergate for the millionth time? I
I
will
don't
do it. We
know.
can do it.
No, only in the sense of its relevance in your story. Tell me who you
Sure.
are, if you don't mind.
Sure. I grew up in Mississippi, conservative household, knew I was trans from a very, very young age, hid it as best as I could, did a ton of drugs, trying to not transition, basically. Oh, thank you, sweetie. And
What do you mean? Just like to get your mind off of your
yeah,
situation?
100% to
Okay.
just like dull it out. Like
Right.
it's literally all I could ever think about ever. And
Right.
just trying to keep those thoughts about what I should be out of my head. Went to
Mm.
rehab, got clean, transitioned, kind of became a typical progressive trans woman for a few years. Gamergate happened, and then I ran for office as a Democrat in 2016, which really radically changed my views. It's one thing to read about stuff online. It's another to go have like 50,000 conversations with strangers and to really
Mm.
understand what the American electorate is thinking about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so different than what people are saying online. And today I'm kind of trying to navigate, I think, a new identity for the Democratic Party. I don't think you're the only person that is looking at what we've turned into and have concluded it's not in your best interest. And I think this is a question that deserves an answer.
So, what are some of the big differences you see online and then going house to house running for office?
Well, I think most people, like, it's a truism, but most people are just not into this hyper online bullshit of who said what or who's responsible for the government shutdown or what Elon
Mm.
Musk is doing that day. It is truly about what the local school district is doing, the roads, how they're getting funded, and honestly, just vibes.
Right.
Which is why I think this feeling that a lot of people have that the Democratic Party stands for elites and not working people is so incredibly dangerous.
So, what are some of your observations of the Democratic Party? And first of all, maybe even
Yeah,
before that,
yeah.
what is your job now? How were you so educated and smart with politics? What do you do?
So I am a hired political gun. Sometimes I get hired to go raise a shitload of money because I'm pretty connected there. Sometimes I get hired to do a political strategy. Sometimes I get hired to just be a strategist and help people figure out how to craft messaging on certain super specialties that I have. So just top to bottom, I'm a good old fashioned Politico. I'm pretty good on teams. You give me a mission, I will bring it across the finish line, whether that's shooting TV ads and bringing them to market or getting a bunch of voters out to canvas. I'm a
Where
good
did you
old
get these
fashioned
skills?
generalist. The good old redneck Mississippi way. I just
Hmm.
didn't know what I was doing and jumped in and figured it out. So, same way I've done everything in my career.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so you've been plugged into politics, paying much closer attention than I have. I don't know how old you are, but you're more experienced politically than me is the point. So tell
Maybe.
me, I think, well, maybe, right? On the left, generally, I believe, right? Fair to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
So can you
definitely a
share some
Democrat.
observations with me about the Democratic Party? What are you feeling?
Well, so this is my perspective on the Democratic Party and why it's broken. Yeah, I didn't go to Harvard. I went to the University of Mississippi, right? I didn't grow up in Massachusetts. I grew up in Mississippi. So when you're talking about my politics, the first thing I'm thinking about is what works for my home state of Mississippi, what works for the working people there. And I think, it's really complicated because for me as a woman and a trans woman, yeah, I feel really strongly that women do not get a fair shake in America. I think there are a lot of structural things that we deal with. I think that's true for trans people. I think it's true for gay people, just up and down. There are serious issues we need to talk about. But at the same time, the Democratic Party has become so obsessed with identity and
Mm.
enforcing this cultural war on people. I think that normal people have gotten the impression we're more interested in respecting non-binary pronouns than we are like a plumber getting health care, right?
Hmm. Right.
So I think like there's this elitist culture that in this inflexibility that has taken over the Democratic Party. And I guess I would love to know, this is something I've always wanted to ask you. Like, I understand, like, you're Jewish, your dad, like, grew up as a Democrat. You've said on Twitter repeatedly you don't find that identity very important to you. But
Which
you
idea? Oh,
kind
The
of,
Jewish
the
identity,
Jewish
right?
identity, and you eventually said, yeah, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. And
Hmm.
I guess I would love to understand what, like, help me understand as a Democratic operative, why did we fuck up so badly it caused you to reconsider your default position?
Well, actually, it was an external factor, so I may be unique in this situation. I don't know if that I have the book within arm's length at the moment, but it's called a few weeks ago, a few months ago. I had the God. It's a book about the relationship between American Jews and Israel,
Mm-hmm,
and furthermore, American Jews and the Democratic Party. And I just
mm-hmm.
hosted these two guys and had really good conversations with them. And I'm trying to think if it was anything beyond that, but that was a fairly influential factor. The point of the book being that if you are starting to identify more with your Jewish identity as you get older, Brian, which I
Mm-hmm.
at the time was saying that I am starting to, I have a Jewish girlfriend now. It means a lot to her. So I'm starting to
Aw.
really, that's a big factor,
By the way, you two are adorable on
Thank you.
Twitter. I
Thank
love
you.
seeing y'all together, and your
Thank
posts are
you.
so sweet. She's so lucky to have a
She's
boyfriend
amazing.
that cares as
Oh,
much as she do.
well, we're very lucky, and
Oh,
it was never important to me to find a Jewish girl necessarily, but I happened to find a girl who is it matters to her this identity quite a
sure.
bit. She grew up, her mom is damn near Orthodox, and so I had it peripherally with cousins growing up, but it was very much on the side. And but this book really hit me at a time where I was open to the argument, which is, hey, if you're feeling like a Jew, that you should align more with the right now because the left is losing its sanity when it comes to Israel.
I cannot disagree with that. I'm pretty strong on Israel myself.
Hmm.
So yes, I can't disagree with that. And I don't think Jews are the only constituency that we've betrayed. I think there's a lot of lip service about how much the Democrats say care about women, and I think when you look at the public policy, it's just not there. There's a lot of lip service about how much the Democrats care about trans people. When you look at the public policy, I don't think it's there. I think a lot of bullshit like Title VIII and trans women in sports is there. But when it comes to the really big stuff like healthcare access, it's
Mm.
just not there in the same way. So I
That's
think that
interesting.
I think that what has happened is the Democratic Party is so obsessed with appearances. I think
Mm.
they've really fundamentally forgotten to dance with the people that brought them.
Well, that's interesting. The idea of, hey, you're not focusing on the core issue or issues when it comes to trans rights.
That's right.
You're focusing on the most inflammatory periphery.
That's
Not
right.
It's just a bad strategy altogether.
It's horrible. I don't need the Democrats to take a hardcore line about non-binary people, like all this bullshit. I need them to focus on bread and butter healthcare
Yeah.
access. Right? It's just absurd.
Yeah, it's interesting in my little journey here. You may have seen from my post, critical race theory was a pretty big milestone for me.
Really?
Yeah, well, I had an amazing professor. He was so brilliant, so good, but the material was very provocative, and it was a force multiplied by my fellow students. So I was 10 years older than I had the work experience that none of them really had. Not to
Hmm.
say that I'm, special, but that is kind of a big difference. These are
No,
all
I understand
kids.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And
when I went back to college after rehab, I was like 5 years older than everyone. There was a
yeah.
huge difference in my ability
Hmm.
to understand and appreciate the work there. So that
Right.
makes
Now, in
sense to me.
fairness, I'm fair. I'm. I wish I was joking, but I'm fairly emotionally stunted. So we were probably all even at the end of the day, but a little bit of that. But the reaction was very like, oh my gosh, this is ground zero for the cultural narratives, the anti-American, the anti-white. Like I was really hearing it. So the combination of the material, and it shook my worldview and caused me to question: do I see the world the way my progressive dad does? Because is this what progressivism is all about? Um, and so, interestingly, there was one class where we watched a video. You must be familiar. Forgive me if I assume that, but are you familiar with the Katie Couric documentary about what's it called? Uh, Gender Revolution, a Gender Revolution.
No,
Oh,
no,
you
I
never?
don't know this.
Okay, okay,
No.
yeah. It was about transgender kids' brains
Sure.
being, and the point was that it's there. You could see it in the brain scan. So I don't know. Don't want to get too deep necessarily into it right
No,
now.
no,
But
no. I'm curious. What was her conclusion there? That you
well,
could basically tell
the
trans kids by brain
yes,
scans?
yep, and that we
Huh.
need to yeah, that was it. And the point was,
That's
for me,
surprising.
my
I'm not familiar with this. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know if it was good science or not, but it was a Katie Couric documentary, and we watched it. And the point was, hey, accept, people be accepting. And it was the theme of the course, though, with critical race theory is, hey, the system isn't working. It's only working actually for these people. And so let's undo it. And for me, in some way, narratively, the
Hmm.
transgender discussion got wrapped into critical race theory at an
Yeah.
interesting time. And only other thing I would say is I've always been very open-minded and very tolerant. And for several years, my company, I've gone to randomly political fundraisers. I'm not active politically, but I'm the person that shows up to occasional events as a rep from our company. We donate
Hmm.
and Victory Fund, LGBTQ causes, supporting. So I've been in rooms with hundreds of trans people, and so I'm cool. Like it's tricky though,
I'm
right?
glad you find me tolerable. That's an
Yeah, no, no,
exciting
I
day
know,
for me. Yes.
I know. Forgive the awkwardness of
No,
my
no, no.
phrasing,
I'll give
but
you a
I'm
hard
just
time.
trying
Yeah.
to, um, I don't know, give you a little background on myself. It's
But you say it was awkward. What was awkward about it?
which part was awkward? Did I
Well,
say?
you said sometimes being in rooms with a bunch of trans
Oh
people
no,
was
no, that's
awkward.
not what
Yeah.
I meant. I said sorry for the way if I was
No, no,
awkward.
no.
No,
Please.
no, no, no. It never felt awkward. I was only saying if I was awkward in the last 2 minutes describing my experience, then forgive me. Um, no, never felt awkward, and that's kind of my point. So these issues, but okay, here's where I can come full circle to it.
Please.
That same professor, he's saying we gotta do all gender bathrooms, and so it is
I
even
don't want
hard.
all gender bathrooms. That's a
I,
terrible
I guess
idea.
Brianna, my point is
Yeah.
even here's my point. For an
Yes.
open-minded person like myself,
Sure.
some of this stuff makes you go, shit, like what is going on?
Yeah.
What is the world?
100%.
What is sanity? What is right?
That's right. Yeah.
So tell me, help a person like me navigate this stuff. Can you?
Well, I can tell you. I mean, so I don't know which part of this to bite off on, but let's go with the all gender bathrooms here thing. Because for a long time I was like you and I just went along with every bit of this non-binary political project. So, oh God, how detailed do I want to get? There is basically a handbook for transgender healthcare. And one of the really big changes a few years ago was redefining the definition of what I am, which is a very well studied phenomena, and expanding it to non binary people. And basically saying, well, you can create your own gender and all of this,
Mm,
and we can open up healthcare access to it. And you can be a dude with a beard and want to go get a vagina or breast implants, and that's fine. And I was like, that's that's a
mm,
little crazy. Like the thing I always wanted to be was as close to the other side as I can get. That's wild. And
mm,
then you start looking at the reasoning for this, and there's no science behind it to justify it. There's no study you can point to justify it. It's literally just fringe progressive hijacking of my healthcare policy
mm,
in a really fringe way. And, I think that one of the structural weaknesses of progressivism is it starts from a really good impulse, right? Like, there are some boys that want to be girls. This has always existed through all of human history.
mm-hmm.
We should make space for them. But then you're getting to stuff like, let's dismantle the entire idea of gender.
Right,
Like,
right,
let's let people design their own pronouns. Let's start doing all this
right.
medicalization stuff with no scientific basis for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way a person like you or me can go, hold on a second, we need to talk about this without everything being moralized. So I think this is something that's happened in the Democratic Party that I'm tremendously troubled by, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, well, what is your view of some of these people who, I don't know what the right terms are, non-binary and so forth?
Yeah.
Is that mental illness, or is it just the next layer of accepting that we need to do as humanity? What is it?
I think ultimately, like, I'm a public policy gal. It doesn't matter what I personally think. It matters what science I can show you that, like, affirming this stuff leads to better mental health outcomes. And I just can't.
All
I can
right.
show you a whole bunch of science that shows a lot of these kids that think they're non binary desist, which is why you probably should medicalize it very soon. Like, we do know that. But it's like I don't consider my opinion important. I've just got to move from what we know. And, the truth is, we don't know much about the trans community and how it's changed in the last 10 years. I can't point you to studies to justify most of it.
Right. So I've seen you post a few times when it comes to bathrooms, or but generally,
Sure.
is there a 3 or 5 point plan that you have to bring sanity to trans
Yeah.
healthcare?
Oh my God. So, look, you've got to understand there was a system that worked for 40 years, okay? So, literally from 1979, we've had a system for people to go through that people in the 1970s looked at and said, you know what, that's reasonable. We'll give you access to the bathroom if you follow that.
Mm,
This is not exactly the progressive era of the United States.
mm,
And what it basically looks like is like, look, if you are someone like Brianna Wu, someone that's had a lifelong condition and a lifelong struggle with this, and you're committing to everything from having your endocrinology system completely replaced with the sex hormones you get to castration and vaginoplasty and all this kind of stuff. Like, you're on a medical pathway. You're fairly serious
oh, you're
about
on the
stuff.
path, baby.
Yeah, yeah. And the way you start that is 3 months of therapy. Then you go, your doctor writes a letter, a doctor signs off on it, you get on HRT, and there's like a documented process that you're going through to legally transition genders. I think if someone is willing to go, like, start that legal process and get that documented with a qualified therapist, a doctor, all of that, I think that's a legitimate case and we should
Mm,
make space in society for that
mhm,
person. That's not what the progressives have done, though, Brian. They passed a law in California that said you could be in California tomorrow and go down to the DMV and just fill out a box on a driver's license form, declare yourself
mm,
female, no therapy, no anything, and then
mhm,
have total right to go into women's spaces despite what
mm,
anyone would say or
mm.
how the fact that you wouldn't really look like you were in place there. So I think that we need to move back to medical standards for gender transition, in my view.
Yeah, pretty compelling,
Do you
reasonable
agree
sounding
with
argument.
that? Does that vibe with you? I think most people
Sure,
are on board with
sure.
that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's the difference between a process and chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, so the situation we are just describing, um, what about this 18 and what about puberty?
Sure. Well, what I can tell you is we need to just take these natal girls off the table. Their desistance rates, their detransition rates are just too sky high. And, over the last 10 years, we've just seen an explosion of these natal girls that are thinking testosterone is going to solve all their problems. Now,
Sorry,
it
what do you mean by what is natal? Forgive the
someone
ignorance.
who grew up as a biological woman and is thinking they want to transition.
Okay.
When I transitioned, the rates were like 1 in 7 people, like 6 and 7 people were like me, and then one was a biological girl that wanted to be a male. Those ratios have flipped today. and it's so overrepresented. We've actually been pushed out of our own population, and the studies are not there in the same way to justify this healthcare treatment. It's got all these comorbidities. Estrogen is a fairly safe drug to take. Testosterone will do all kinds of things to your body that will shorten your lifespan, to be honest. So, I think that medicalizing these young girls, I think it just needs to be taken off the table. They can wait until they're 18 and a better assessment can be made. Testosterone will work equally well for them at, 25 as it will at 15. There's no rush for this whatsoever.
Mm,
What I think though, and I understand this is hard for people to understand, is the boys that want to be girls. Testosterone is a one-way street and it will
mm,
break your body.
mm,
I can tell you having your jaw taken apart is
mm,
not a fun weekend.
mm,
So, the desistance rates for these boys that want to become girls is so much lower. It's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. And, they're not desisting in the same way. And, the fact that, that testosterone will do such permanent damage to their bodies.
mm,
To me, what I think we need to do is to radically raise the standards. Like, clearly, far too many of these kids are being medicalized. So I think someone that shows up like suddenly at 15 and they're like, I want to be a girl, I think you gotta go really slowly there.
mm,
But the cases I'm thinking about are ones at like 5, 6, 7 years old. The kid went to their mom and said, I desperately want to be a girl.
mm.
Just that was their identity all the way through. It's still there after puberty. I think we should give those kids a path to integrate as well as they can. So that's my view.
And I don't mean to nail
Sure.
you down, but are you saying that there is an argument for um, postponing puberty, or is it cruel to put a genuine trans child, okay,
Yeah,
through puberty?
of
That's the
course it
question.
is. Of
It
course it
is.
is. It's horrible, Brian. Oh my God. I felt my body, like my suicidal ideation went through the
Yeah.
roof.
Yeah.
I couldn't think
But you're
clearly.
saying we can't do it in most cases just because it's just not the way to acceptance.
I'm saying that it is cruel in a way that we are not talking about to force a child to have their body turn into something really grotesque that they're not going to want that to be long term. So
Yeah.
it's really difficult though, because I also think far too many of these children are being medicalized. So I
Mm.
think like we need to really raise the
Raise the standards.
standards to
Right.
this.
Right.
Just to give you, and I'm sorry to get so technical on the trans stuff, but the standards used to be for you to transition underage. We had like a set of standards and you had to really adhere to those standards. Today, you just need 2 out of 6. It is
Mm.
insane.
Mm.
So, I think the truth is it's catching a lot of these boys that are just going to grow up to be gay.
Right.
So, I
Well,
don't
raising the
know.
standards could
Yeah.
theoretically,
Yeah.
we all want a perfect bullet, right? A solution to everything, but it seems like a great idea. Raise the
Yeah.
standards. I mean, yeah.
Radically raise the
Right.
standards. And we
Yep.
need to certify who can do these assessments as
Hmm.
well. Kids are being rushed through. It doesn't serve anyone. But honestly, if you just take the natal girls off the table, like that is going to free up so many more resources. If they
Mm.
turn 18, if they want to transition, they're going to look exactly the same. So it doesn't
Mm.
matter, you
I
know?
see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. Well, thanks for spending so much time with me on
Sure.
the trans.
I'm happy to talk trans stuff, but I am more interested in you
Okay.
because
Go
it
ahead.
really, I'm really truly curious what is causing you to look like most Americans don't wake up thinking trans people. That's what I'm going to base my politics on. Like we are a
Certainly not.
weird
No.
esoteric part of public policy that affects my life greatly,
Mm.
but it's not really that relevant to yours. So
Not at
I
all.
want to know what is driving your questions about public policy and the Democratic Party making you search for your identity.
Yeah.
That's what I want to understand.
It's truly psychological family stuff at bottom. It's this relationship with my dad, his two brothers, one of whom we just lost. Thank you in advance. Unfortunately, drug overdose this past year, but he was an incredible guy. Actually, just because I have it right here, look at this guy. What a cool. I
Oh
mean,
my God.
and look at this guy. Let's see. He was
Oh,
this one. And this was him and his band. Very left leaning,
yeah.
very active, very smart, very knowledgeable, very brilliant screenwriter. So I have Uncle John was the screenwriter. I have Uncle Rick, who do you know Richard R.J. Eskow with the Zero Hour? Have you heard of that?
I don't. I'm
Oh, you don't?
sorry.
Okay, no worries. He's got a fairly big progressive radio show. He was Bernie Sanders' third hire in 2016 when he ran for president. So I mean, he's kind of a little player, um, and very progressive. And my dad, who's a big intellect, voracious reader, um, they all had a big influence on me. And when you combine that with me being aimless for so long and kind of having no direction and just not maturing, frankly, until I hit law school. And, it's been a very productive several years for me. But altogether, I was just voting for Democrats because that's how I was raised.
Sure.
And when studying critical race theory, in when DeSantis was railing against it on the news every night, studying impeachment when Trump was being impeached, it just all lined up for a questioning for me, a reevaluation. But it was CRT because of the socialist Marxist underpinnings, just logically of hey, this is the American system. It's based on minimal government and individual rights, private property in particular. That's traditional American government. That is a white system. It benefits white people. We need to undo it because it's not right, because this country is not just for white people anymore. So what do we undo it, rearrange it to? Well, that's the open question, but you could see where there's a good argument that's Marxist. So just began to question my dad's worldview and his brother's worldview, and realizing that I was a little late in forming my own,
Yeah.
playing too many video games, and just not reading
I
enough
can
as an
really
adult.
understand that because I grew up in a very conservative household. Like, well, let's see if
Mm.
this makes sense to you. Like, I grew up in a very, very conservative household. And then, I transitioned, and it was really apparent to me that conservatives, like, let's just be honest, they don't like people like me generally. And I moved really far
Yeah.
away from that for a while. But this is where I would really encourage you to think about this, Brian, because the older I've gotten and the more I've traveled through life, something I've noticed is like my background in growing up in a conservative family, it actually has served me really well through my career and those
Hmm.
values. If you're transitioning, I think a sense of personal responsibility and a belief that your destiny is in your own hands,
Mm.
like that is tremendously helpful. And to me, I think if you look at my Twitter, you can see I'm a free thinker. I'm not really
Hmm.
ideologically captured by the Democrats or the Republicans. If they've got a good idea, I will acknowledge that. So I think maybe in time you'll be like I am, where you can see the benefits from your family's worldview and kind of integrate that as you are asking questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, I should just continue to be honest and say, dad's a great guy. Really,
Sure,
mom's a great. My family members are all great people, but the family unit did not thrive. Okay, it was a rough and bumpy upbringing, as many of us have had.
sure.
And so you just start to say, hey, like, I don't I don't necessarily, I think Ron DeSantis, I think I like that guy and the way he thinks about things. So
Really?
I don't know.
You
These
don't
things
think he's
start to,
kind of a jerk?
I mean, is he a good leader? Is he not a good leader? I don't
You
know.
tell me. What do you
I don't
think?
know. I don't know.
I mean,
But
he's kind
I
of
guess I
persecuted
guess
people like me in Florida. So,
okay.
you
Well,
know.
I didn't know that. Okay, well, what's up with that?
Well, he's passed a law in Florida that says basically it constrains like the ability of doctors to write prescriptions for adults
Oh, really?
for HRT, making it difficult for adults to get HRT.
Hmm.
and giving pharmacists, as I recall, the ability to deny us access to the drugs we need to live,
Hmm.
which I don't think is very helpful. But make your own assessment. I'm just telling
Yeah,
you
I did
mine.
not know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm a fairly ignorant person and fairly unaffected. So I will
If you
agree.
went to law school, I don't believe that, for
Well,
starters.
I wrote this professor uh, an unnecessary paper, an unasked for paper at the end of the second semester because I took two courses with them. It was just me basically ranting and raving about not, but me saying, "Hey, recognizing that these issues don't affect me. And as much as I don't agree with everything that I heard in that classroom, I do have to acknowledge that I am a privileged person. I do, I've had it so easy, Brianna.
Have you?
So I, well,
I used to believe this. I think
mm,
this is one of the flaws of progressivism. Is
mm,
like giving this hierarchy of oppression. I don't I'm really increasingly stopping to think this is that important.
when you say this, what do you say?
I think, one of the things is I think that framing America as like a deeply racist country that is just begging to like put the boot on black people's necks and to hate trans
Right.
people and to crush women. I used to think that was true
Mm,
when I was really deep into progressivism. But I gotta tell you, one of the things that running for Congress really taught me is that most Americans really do want to give most people a fair shot.
right.
And I think part of the nature of our country is evaluating people by who you see in front of you. And I do think America is one of the best countries in the entire world for giving people opportunities. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe that matches with your experience. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, growing up in the house I did, it was always a very critical view of America. Okay. It was more critical than proud, I would say. And the rich need to pay their fair share, but it was always
Sure,
economic leftism.
sure.
But in that class, it's all the system, all of that, everything you just said. And I found myself saying, no, I don't agree with that, actually.
Yeah,
I don't agree with that.
yeah,
And then Vivek comes onto the scene. Who is this Vivek guy? He was a Democrat at one point or something. He was asking, who was it, Al Sharpton questions on the news in that old clip. He was participating on the left in some way many years ago. I don't know. As a kid, he's not this hardcore typical Republican. And he came onto the scene spitting fire about meritocracy and railing against critical race theory,
sure.
and that was very attractive to me. And I said, oh, I could maybe support this guy, but he couldn't step out of Trump's shadow. And then Kennedy came onto the scene, and I said, okay, this guy comes from the left. He's speaking in unified tones. He's going on doing long interviews. He's got a worldview. This is what I like. I'm really into this. And I
Yeah,
became the Kennedy guy, and then I followed him to Trump with all of the current events. So the current events can't be dismissed either. Has it been a bumpy ride under Biden, or have I just been captured by X algorithms?
I think it's a little bit of X's algorithms. I think Biden has been a generally good president in my view.
Mm-hmm.
But let's come back to what you were saying. I think, generally speaking, I would agree with Vivek more than I would my own party. Just in the sense that, this is something as I've really gotten involved in the Israel, like Jewish discussion. The thing I've really grown to appreciate about Jews that I wish I could wave my magic wand and bring to the trans community, I love the no victims complex. I
Mm-hmm.
love this. I wish I could replicate this in every trans person out there because the truth is, America is probably the best society in all of human history for treating people like me fairly. And yeah, we've got some really tough battles that normal
Mm-hmm.
people don't do, but you got access to healthcare here like in a way I never dreamed of. So I like this idea of not saying like we need to wait around for utopia. You need to take your own, we need to stop being victims. We need to stop feeling sorry for ourselves and we need to appreciate how good the country is. That's
Yeah.
really appealing to me. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And it's
Yeah,
striking to hear it from someone who has endured so many challenges, who's part of a community that has so many challenges. It's
yeah,
particularly striking. So, I certainly do feel that way. All my friends are conservatives, essentially. Uh,
sure.
so it wasn't a huge stretch for me to make this leap, but on the other hand, it was everything. So I
But
don't
don't
know.
you recognize like there is a tendency, like I think we're both very happy to focus on the excesses of wokeism. And I think
Hmm.
we both share that. But there is a political project in the Republican Party to, do you know what I mean? Like, I mean,
Go
they're
on.
really making my life very hard right now. Like making it so I can't use the
I
bathroom.
see.
You
Right.
know, there is,
Yeah.
there is a culture of racism. I think in the
Right.
Republican Party. That's not
Mm.
to say all conservatives are
Right.
racist,
Right.
but there is, there's a culture of white supremacy that needs an answer there. So, I mean, do you not see that flaws within the
Um,
Republican
I
Party?
see it. I see it with the bathroom situation for trans people.
Yeah,
I don't more so see it the race issue right now,
sure.
but it could just be my ignorance. But no, for me, it's economic stuff and it's cultural stuff. And cultural stuff, like I said, I've always been open. I've always been a tolerant person.
Sure.
So understanding, even what I don't understand, just saying, hey, I've been around enough trans people to know these are very sane people who are
Well,
just people, living their lives. So it's really no question for me, but it is complicated because
of
of all
course
this
it
other.
is.
It's nothing's easy.
No.
Nothing's easy.
I mean,
But
like trans women in sports. Of course I shouldn't play in sports. Of course. These are two
yeah,
competing interests.
right. And
Right. Yeah.
I guess that's obvious. Sure. I mean, are we on X right now? Yes, for sure. No.
Well, to me, it's obvious. Do you not disagree with that?
No, it is obvious, but ultimately I want to be super compassionate and I want to do what's right. And if yes, I want to say it's obvious, but I want to be open minded. I don't know. Yes, yes, it
That's
is
fair.
obvious. It is obvious.
Well, I mean, it's. I don't know. I don't want to keep getting into trans stuff. I guess it's like, do you not see one of the reasons I personally, like, despite all my issues with the progressives, which as many issues as you have with that, imagine how many more I have when this fringe movement within progressivism has given the Republicans all the ammo they need to
Yeah,
take away my health care.
right. I see.
Imagine how resentful I am at
Yeah.
that. The reason I personally could never vote for Donald Trump or the Republican Party is I think there's a corruption that goes along with that and a lawlessness and a lack of commitment to democracy that transcends any issue I might have with right versus left or tax rates or anything like that. I
Mhm.
do not see a contempt for the rule of law that's kind of baked into the Republican Party nowadays.
I will say that on January 6th, 21, the images were very disturbing, and I was
Yeah,
like, this guy's toast politically. And that was about as deep as I got into researching it. I was in law school at the time. I wasn't, and this is where I have to confess ignorance on so many of the
sure.
issues. And I thought he was done, and there was no way he would have a career again. And here we are, all these years later. Somehow I became convinced that the mainstream media was lying. I mean, I started to really buy it. Am
Yeah,
I a fool, Brianna?
I think so. I really urge you to go read deeply reported stuff about this.
Hmm.
I mean, this was like, if you're in law school, like
Right.
something I believe as a non lawyer is America's like one of our greatest victories is our legal system and jurisprudence. Like this is one of the
It's not bad.
greatest things about, well, show me a better system
No,
around the
I'm
world.
totally with you.
I mean, so like for me, just as a citizen, I take the Constitution really seriously. Like I tear up thinking about how lucky we are to be Americans.
Yeah.
And when I think about a president that schemed
Yeah.
to violate the peaceful transfer of power, I mean, it's not right versus left for me.
Yeah.
That's just like, am I a fucking American or am I
Yeah, it is
not?
pretty crazy that I
Yeah,
got to where I got to after all that,
yeah.
considered how that was not a bar to me. Um, I somehow became convinced that he took a lot of unnecessary bullshit and somehow justified it. I somehow said, you know what? Two rights don't make a wrong, but
Well,
there's
what
just too
seemed
much.
like it was wrong to you? What seemed like it was incorrect to you?
Well, you could go through the standard litany of right-wing talking points that you would see on X with the Hunter Biden laptop story. The
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with prosecuting January 6th. Like what
well,
specifically? Yeah.
no, I'm not talking within the case itself. I'm talking big picture. Somehow, I arrived at the place where I could say to myself, you know what he did on January 6th was too far. It wasn't right. His, particularly, the legal challenges, was, it seemed, outside of bounds, but I didn't study it deeply. It seemed that way. So this is what I said. I said, you know what? It seems that way. I'm not giving him a pass within that case, but I am saying I was able to get to a place where I could vote for him looking at the big picture. Uh,
Okay.
people definitely question my sanity, and other people say you're a hero, Brian.
Yeah.
You know?
I think one of the things that really troubles me within the Republican Party is it seems like there's a real, I mean, it's infected the left as well, to be clear, but it seems like there's a real insistence on choosing your own reality
Yeah.
where facts just don't get through. And I mean, to be clear, this exists on the left as well. I mean, I think we've completely ignored what's going on at our border. I think that increasingly we are just oblivious to the threat of Islamist terrorism here. It was reported this weekend Biden is like looking at taking the Boston bomber off death row, which I found abhorrent morally.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would continue as a Democratic fundraiser if he ends up doing that, because that
Right.
was a terrorist attack on my town. But from my estimation, if you look at polls, like I think it's like 80% of Republicans like don't believe that January 6th even happened, which is terrifying to me. So I think
Do you
like,
think there's no
yeah,
reason for people to think, oh, the deep state, the media, either or, was very unfair to Trump? And
I think you can feel that way, but I mean, I'm sure Hillary feels that her election wasn't fair to her.
mm,
That doesn't preclude the peaceful transfer of power. Like, what is
mm,
America if not the peaceful democratic transfer of power? Like, you can adjudicate that
yeah.
through the courts, but after that's done, like, it's up. Like, we're Americans. Well, the
Yeah.
Constitution matters. I mean, do you not
Oh,
agree
for
with
sure.
that?
Oh, I think it
Yeah,
matters. I actually became licensed.
right.
I don't know that I'll be getting any work from you after this conversation. I don't know that you'll
Sure.
be employing me, but I became licensed to practice 2 weeks ago at a
Good for
UPS.
you.
Thank you. And you swear an oath to the Constitution, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to do that. And it's actually a really interesting milestone on my journey here, because it's like, okay, well, I just swore an oath to this thing, and I came
Yeah.
out of law school really revering, not that I didn't before, but and so trying to rectify, resolve this reverence I have for the Constitution and this progressive worldview that I was raised to believe. There's a conflict there, isn't there?
Yeah, I agree. But the Democratic Party, I can tell you, as someone who spent a decade in progressive politics, like progressives are not the Democratic Party. The majority of the Democratic Party is just mainstream
Mm-hmm.
normie liberals. And
Mm,
I think about liberal not in that like tax policy sense, but that old school liberal way, meaning like free speech,
mm-hmm.
open expression,
Yep.
rule of law,
Right.
freedom for people like me to make our own healthcare decisions. To
Yes.
me, that's liberalism.
Yes.
And I think both conservatives and the fringe left have lost that. So when I think about what my political identity is, I really hold up those liberal values as extremely important, and I abhor illiberalism. I
Yeah.
hate it when progressives are trying to shut down speech and moralize everything in sight and say you can't ask that question. Yeah, I abhor it when J.K. Rowling is sending
Mm.
waves of harassment my way because she doesn't like my opinions on trans stuff. Like both of those impulses are illiberal in my view.
I do, and I will concede your point earlier that there is definitely an anti-trans wave on the right, and I'm not okay with that. So I will concede that. Yes, liberalism. This is obvious, and the question, right? In a sense, it's dignity, individualism,
Free speech.
rights. This is the basis of my political identity. I know this, but I'm trying to find my place. And it's a wacky world out there. Can I be blamed for with COVID? And I mean, it has been a wild few years, has it not?
Of course it has.
Yeah.
What did you find objectionable about COVID?
I don't know. It was so bizarre. I as a construction manager building apartments, we were open the whole time. So life was relatively normal for me, but I don't know, Brianna. It's just weird. It's just all of it from 15 days to slow the spread to toilet paper shortages to fear mongering to um, not knowing the truth about the origins of it.
Well,
You-
I have to agree with that. I thought it was very
Yeah,
disturbing to see that shut down. I mean,
there's
it seems
just
fairly obvious to me it's a lab leak. So,
right,
yeah.
right. So there's just a million reasons to question reality. I hate to say it. I know I sound crazy.
No, I mean, look, let's be clear. You're tweeting some stuff like, is the moon landing real? And I was like, oh
Actually, no,
boy.
no. Actually, so
Yes.
are you familiar
Yes.
with the Danny Jones podcast? You're
I'm
probably not
not.
because
I'm
you're very
not.
sane. Yeah,
I'm
don't.
sorry.
I highly recommend you don't go listen to it. He's um he's kind of like a Joe Rogan, I guess. He has all these. He's pretty damn big. He has all these
Mhm.
trippy, far out stuff. This guy that he had recently that I'm listening to, he didn't say the moon landing was fake. Oh no, we landed, but there are structures there. So,
Oh,
so that sounded real. Okay,
fair enough. I
so
mean, I can tell you what I am doing. Like, Wall Street Journal is very expensive. It's like $35 a month. And, I make sure I read from the Times. We read Washington Post. I read Wall Street Journal, right? I try to make sure, like, I'm consuming like stuff that's not just things on Twitter that
sure,
reconfirm what I want to believe,
yeah.
and I try to really find that high quality reporting. So that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah. No, I get my morning newsletters. I get CFR Daily, Council of Foreign Relations.
Sure.
I get Tangle. I get uh, daily global daily post. I think it's called. I get the world news every morning, and I try to keep up. But I definitely operate in some wacky areas too. So there's no doubt about
So
it.
is it that you feel you can't trust mainstream news anymore? Is that kind of where some of your doubt is coming
I
from?
I for sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. I have
Interesting.
yes. I just feel like the reaction to Trump I thought was over the top.
Sure.
I really am a believer in Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
And I see it in my dad. I see it in my own father. Okay? This is a very reasonable man, very grounded, very grounded. And when it comes to this guy, he just loses it in an instant.
My
And it's
husband is the same way. I know what
yeah,
you're
yeah.
talking about.
So just a million reasons for me to go, my goodness, maybe the worldview I was raised to believe in is wrong. Maybe I was wrong about this guy. Shit. All this,
Well, yeah.
I know Biden's been a decent president, and I can understand that argument. But also, the world has kind of caught fire under him, has it not?
In what ways? I mean, I understand inflation, but that's not an American issue. That's a
How
worldwide
about the
issue.
war? How about Israel and Ukraine?
Well, what should Biden have done differently with Ukraine, do you think?
I don't know. I'm not ready to submit my application to the State Department, but I'm just saying the argument begins to present itself. Hey, things were calmer under Trump.
Well, I think the world is destabilizing. Like, that's unquestionably true. COVID sent the entire world off course.
Hmm.
You certainly see, like, ask Iran today if they think
Hmm.
their country is destabilizing,
Right.
where the government is currently shut down. I was reading this just before we recorded. The power plants aren't even operating in Iran right now, and the government is shut down. Like,
Mm.
so I don't think it's just America that is having an issue with this kind of destabilization.
Mm.
Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine directly as a response to him going a little crazy under COVID. And, I have the assessment that we should have given Ukraine more weapons, but I also don't know how much Vladimir Putin deciding to invade Ukraine is on the Biden administration. So,
Mm.
what else are your
Yeah.
kind of objections there? I
No,
don't
I
mean to
think
minimize it.
no,
Yeah.
no, no. I think
Yeah.
it's perfectly reasonable to say that I may have been punishing Biden unfairly, with my vote. But when you add it all up, the time I spent with my phone in my hand on X, the algorithm, Kennedy, but it really was a long, slow process for me. But it's also true that I may be still acting out of ignorance. I don't.
Well, I don't know. It's
The study,
sure,
the class
please.
was very impactful to me. That class, man, really the things coming out. I was like, what is this world? I'm out of college or 10 years. I go back to law school, and you can't say boyfriend or girlfriend. You got to say partner. Like even the littlest things. I didn't recognize the
Please,
world, so
please.
it was a big shock to me.
See, this is where progressivism is just cancer for the left because
Mm.
it's like normal people like you are looking at this and going, the stuff is just nuts.
It's all deconstruction.
Yeah. The goal is to take American society apart and rebuild something new from the ashes, which is
Yeah,
crazy because I love
right.
this country. Yeah.
Exactly. That is, Brianna. That is really the core issue for me that got me 95% of the way there. And all the other crap um, is really just the 5%. Um, so what is left of progressivism then? If you take away all the bullshit, what is the good part about progressivism?
I mean, I got into progressivism because I thought we need a better healthcare country in
Hmm.
the healthcare in this country.
Right.
It's not to say I don't think a private, privatized health insurance model can work. It's that, like, even the economist will tell you that Medicare for all is a more efficient system that will save money. That makes sense to me personally. Reasonable
Hmm.
people can disagree, but Jesus Christ, I did not get into progressivism to to like to say people like me are biological women. Like that's just
Hmm.
insane,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or so many parts of it, or defund the police. That's just insane. So
Right.
I don't know
Right.
what to say other
100%.
than the Democratic Party is going to marginalize these nut jobs left and right. They're going bankrupt. The DSA is bankrupt. And the progressives are being kicked out of Congress. AOC just wanted a shot on oversight. She was voted out because no one wants her to be the voice of the party right now. So I think this
Hmm.
is like a issue that's self-correcting from my point of
Gotcha.
view.
So it's happening.
I think so.
Right. And these people, the Democrats just need to embrace rational policies. It's pretty obvious.
It's crazy. We need to de emphasize these racial politics and these identity
Hmm.
politics. Like, there's a way that we can say, like, look, we're a party that stands for women's dignity,
Right.
but without saying, like, if you're a man, you need to shut the fuck up until a
Right.
woman gives you permission to speak. Like, those
Right.
are,
Right.
there really is a less stupid way to approach this.
Yeah, it really is this progressive attitude of tear it all down.
Yeah.
That is the problem because you take a guy like me who's into equality and dignity and all good stuff, and he was just said, I don't want you to tell me that if I'm making a creative team that I need to have 5 Asians and 5 Black people. Let me live my life.
Of
Let
course.
us all live our lives. It's gone too far. Hmm.
Yeah. But the Republican project, I would really urge you to look at this. Like you say you value stability. Look at like we're recording this on Sunday. Like our government nearly shut down on Friday evening because the Republicans just simply cannot govern worth anything. Like you've got people there that do not think it matters if the United States defaults on our debt. Like have a discussion about slashing bad spending. I would love that. I have
Hmm.
no issue with that whatsoever. But
Hmm.
like this is a party that is just reckless with the way it governs. I don't think there's the same interest in just bread and butter governing with the Republican Party, but maybe you have a different perspective.
So why are you not a Republican then? Maybe I can ask that.
I think that, for me, equality for people is really baked into my worldview. And I saw what Republican policies did to my home state of Mississippi, where, we needed to make a generational investment in education and housing. And the answer was always somehow cut taxes for rich people. And that's going to fix my home state. It's just never going to work. I think that working so close with the Democratic Party, I understand just how deeply flawed and power hungry and insincere and broken the Democratic Party is. And I criticize it literally every single day. It's just if the alternative is these people that just don't seem to be tethered to any kind of reality,
Mm.
I just don't I don't think that's a step in the right direction.
So you're torn between the progressive fringe, who up
Yeah.
until now have been throwing the party off course, and the Republicans, who you say mostly are no are not much better.
I mean, do you think Donald Trump is good at governing based on what happened from 2016 to 2020? Because I don't.
What did you have a problem with? Because I thought things were humming along fine.
Really? It
Yes.
was swear to God chaos every single day. His Secretary of State,
Wow.
like you say, you care about Middle East policy.
Right.
His Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, quit after, what was it, a
Right.
year, saying he was completely unserious. Trump would not meet with him.
Mm.
You had all these government vacancies just totally unfilled.
Yeah. To me, none of that means
Yeah,
anything because wars weren't happening that I was aware of. Right. I mean, in my little bubble, things seem to be fine
really.
despite all of the chaos. It all seemed to be palace intrigue and TDS in
Well,
hindsight.
yeah,
But
I don't think I really agree with that assessment, but
right.
it's my job.
What do you think
So
about his team now?
one of the reasons you're not seeing me critique Trump as heavily right now is I don't have any data yet to decide this. I don't think Trump is a good person, but I'm kind of waiting to see if it's going to be as much chaos this time around. America, things are just moving so quickly in the world. We can't go 4 years without leadership. So I want our president to succeed, and maybe more normie Republicans will be in charge this time.
Mm.
But the government shutdown and that chaos with Mike Johnson, it doesn't give me hope personally.
Mm. And so, what to make? If I could just go to another question about
Sure.
Elon Musk's involvement. Tell me.
I think that Elon is. I think there's a rich history in this country of billionaires influencing our public policy that does not generally end well in a historic sense. It literally led to the Great Depression. So I am concerned about this. But again, like I'm waiting and seeing.
If you don't mind educating me on the history, what do you mean, billionaire?
Sure, sure. So one of the reasons for the Great Depression is we had what we called the Roaring Twenties, where a
Ah,
who was equivalent of a billionaire back then was our Treasury Secretary, and set our monetary policy to let the stock market do whatever it wanted to generate money for the rich, and this is directly what led to the Great Depression. Was that
mm,
lack of basically that lack of regulation there? So
interesting.
I don't think Elon is a very good manager, to be honest with you.
Mm,
Tesla, they FSD is still not on the road. The Model 3 is aging. The Cybertruck is financially a failure. The Tesla Roadster is nowhere to be seen. The Tesla Semi was a failure. SpaceX is run by someone totally different. Tesla bots are nowhere to be seen. I know they put out all this happy stuff about X metrics, but the truth is it's dying as
mm,
far as the relevance, and I
mm.
just don't see much evidence that Elon would be good for the United States government. But maybe you have a different assessment.
I mean, I, I he's accomplished more than I have. I mean, now you might be able to say that about the rock that I'm looking at outside my window, but no,
No,
okay, but okay, enough with the self-deprecation, Brian.
yeah,
We're
do this a
beyond.
lot
I
actually.
no, I know it's a bad habit, but Elon, it seems to me, has the same voting record as I have: Obama, Clinton, Joe, Trump, and he seems to be closely aligned philosophically with the Viveks, with it, which is this libertarian kind of streak. Maybe it's just the right in general, which is deregulate is good, and so. obviously I know that I care about dignity, equality, and liberal values, but then it really comes to the economy. And who do I think is right? These people who have success in the economy, or the people like my dad? I'm just taking it to my mind, who has been very fortunate, and I don't know if you put him in Siberia that he's going to build up a master business. If you leave him to his own devices, it's just not in our nature. We're artists. We're wacky creatives.
Sure.
And so which is the best way to organize a society? Do the libertarians have it right? Is the free market the best way? Because I want to believe that we all want to get to the same place where we have a thriving society.
Yeah. I hear you on that. I think, like, I read a book called Ludicrous that really got into the history of Elon and how he made his money through Tesla, which, I mean, just really oversimplifying it, comes from not being straight with investors and taking a lot of government money and just promising wild thing after wild thing with Tesla that never came true. And being rewarded in the stock market from it. So, what I see with Elon Musk is just a rich, rich history of a lot of big promises and not following through. So, make your own assessment about that. But honestly, like the Model 3 is what he's done that's been successful. He didn't develop that. Like the predecessors to Tesla actually founded it, had the Model 3 in the pipeline. The Model Y is built off the Model 3 chassis. And it's what, 10 years old at this point? It looks like shit. The sales are going down. And the products that he has brought out under his tenure, like the Cybertruck, the values are dropping stunningly quickly. The Tesla Semi came to market. They had to deal with Pepsi. Just immediately it failed because there's just not a financial argument for running it. The Tesla Roadster is not out yet. That's been, what, 8 years that they've promised it? So I personally see Tesla as, I'm sorry to say, like a scam company. Yeah, make your own assessment there, but I just don't see much positive that he's doing as far as leadership. I see a lot of cultural wars he's good at fighting. I think he's good at bringing people like you in from saying he's from free speech, but then he's not for free speech. So,
Yeah, I mean, Elon was definitely a bonus for me in the whole thing, but it was more so, okay, Vivek, Kennedy, and then, okay,
sure.
you know what, Trump. But Elon Musk did not hurt the situation. So can I ask you about Kamala?
Well, I wanna really drill down on Elon. What is it that you like about him? Like, I can
just
see how
the
the
idea
cultural stuff would be
just the
appealing.
idea that
Yeah.
there's a tech genius running 6 companies from my perspective. Well, what do I know, Brianna? But just kind of a cool guy. I don't know. Just kind of the nerd in me.
Sure.
I don't know.
I can appreciate that.
He's
Like,
playing
I'm
video
an
games.
entrepreneur.
He's
Yeah.
he's talking about ayahuasca once in a while or something. He's funny as hell, kind of.
He's
kind of
fucking Amber
autistic.
Heard, who's gorgeous. I get that.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
he's just kind of cool, man.
Sure. He's out there like really tapping into a lot of resentment that people feel about progressives by claiming
Yes.
that Twitter is for free speech. But then you look at the reality, like there's a New York Times study that came out. I'm sorry, it wasn't New York Times. I think it was Verge, like an independent study that came out about how he put his finger on the Twitter algorithm to make it really fringe right wing during the election. And that's not my opinion. That's an independent study that came to. So how is it free speech if he's juicing Twitter up to mirror his political views? Like that's the opposite of free speech to me.
Yeah, and I don't know, and it really doesn't matter what it was before he took over. It doesn't matter. I don't know. On one hand, you could say, no, you're right. It's not free speech at that point.
Yeah.
I suppose.
I mean, he's banning. He's in the algorithm. He's very much controlling and de-emphasizing trans content. So if I'm out there, saying, please treat me with dignity, here's this bill that comes up, like there's a reason you're not aware of this stuff. It's his thumb on the scale. So I think that he's a very skilled cultural warrior, But I think if you really examine what he's putting out, it's actually similar to Trump. There's just not a lot of objective progress you can point to.
Yeah, he's so strong on the trans thing, and it's just not simple. You can't be that strong when a situation is complex, right?
Sure.
You have to be nuanced, and yeah, I could see him thinking to himself, "Well, I believe in the right things, and so my way is the right way, and so we're going to have freedom of speech. But if an idea is just harmful to society, then we're going to cut it out." And
Right.
he makes a bad judgment there, it seems.
For you as someone who's Jewish, like you see these like accounts like Suleiman that's
Mm,
out there, and this is just content that's thrived under Elon Musk of coming out and
yeah,
telling millions of people that Jews are behind 9/11. I mean, how
yeah.
does that
So
make you feel that that stuff is just thriving? Like I've never seen
that's
anti-Semitism
funny.
this bad in my life.
So I hope I'm not oversharing, but my
Sure,
girlfriend's dad is a proud Tesla owner,
sure.
and I saw him recently. And he said, "Oh, Elon Musk, that anti-Semite." I'm like, "Oh, really? You think Elon Musk's the anti-Semite? That's interesting. A Jewish man. This guy's a Jewish guy." And I never got that sense. At the same time, yes, I see all this content, and you go, "Wow," but I don't attribute it to him. So I guess the question is, if I take it at your word that he is deboosting trans content, why would he not be deboosting that content? Is the question. It's a choice. I don't know. I don't know.
I think it's really difficult. I mean, I don't think you can post the explosion of anti Semitism and blame it all on Elon Musk. I think clearly this is a ideology that has destroyed the minds of most progressives. And I think, unfortunately, the fringe
Mm,
left is the home of anti Semites today. We can
right.
say that honestly.
Hmm.
I just, I don't know. I guess I just. I understand all these choices are very difficult. I just don't see him as someone acting with a lot of integrity myself, nor the Republicans overall. So,
Mm.
but maybe I'm wrong.
So who do we like? Who
Who
is
do
in?
I like right
Yeah,
now?
who has a lot of integrity? Who's the guy in 2028? Is Kamala?
Oh, God.
No, she wasn't. It wasn't a good idea, was it?
I mean, I've worked with her office. I've really come away impressed with the staff that she's put together for working on initiatives while she was vice president. But I mean, the truth is the Democrats just need a reboot, top to bottom. The Obama Biden era is over. We need a new identity. We need new leaders. We need new ideas. We need a new culture, and that's just the plain truth of it. Until we can address that
Hmm.
and make people like you that have a background in construction go,
Yeah.
that's the party standing for me
Right.
again. I just don't think we're going to win elections.
Yeah. Yeah. Vance, is he going to be a formidable foe? Do you think?
I do. I do. Yeah, I got a lot of heat for saying this. I think he's a rather attractive man, which does not hurt.
Right.
I think he can, I think he has a youthful energy
Right.
that is infectious, and I think he's effective. So
Mm-hmm.
there it is.
Yeah. Any other thoughts generally? Idea, advice from me.
I think, it's really hard going against your tribe. And I really understand this mission of looking for your identity. I mean, I think something we really share in common is I spent a year and a decade in progressive politics. I was literally a national celebrity from my progressive stances, and I left that tribe because I came to the conclusion that I was standing with people that were fundamentally immoral. So I understand
Mm,
what you're saying there, but if I can offer a respectful opinion, I do think you're seeing stuff online, and I think you're very influenced by the algorithm,
right.
and I think it is affecting your analysis in my estimation.
Mm, that's fair. I totally
So
get it. All
as
right.
it does me, as it does
Right.
me too.
So along that line, I should ask, do you believe in aliens? It's a podcast. We have to ask.
I think that it is more likely than not that life exists out there in the galaxy. It's mathematically improbable that it doesn't. Are they interacting with the Earth currently? That also seems mathematically improbable to me.
So you don't go down the 0 point energy that makes it all possible rabbit holes. Come on, you've seen this stuff.
I have. I'm a big Art Bell fan. Cannot say I personally subscribe to it. No.
Right, right, right.
Fair
Well,
enough.
yeah, no, that's fair enough. Well,
Karen, do you mind if I just ask? I want to ask a
yeah.
question. Like,
Go ahead.
do you find me to be open and like, do you find me to be a credible person in the Democrats to talk
Absolutely.
to as you're
Very,
dealing with this stuff?
100%.
Yeah,
Absolutely. No, I would vote for that. Whatever, I don't know what your mission is with your you're a mercenary, essentially a political mercenary, but absolutely, 100%.
well, I guess it's just one of the things that's really important to me is I think that we've gotten so walled off on left and right. And I think we need good faith conversations with one another again
Mm,
where we can just listen to each other without judgment. So
yeah.
I hope I've done that today with
You know,
you.
you absolutely have. You've been, how should I say, the exact type of guest I was hoping to ever find when I started this thing.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the documentary Best of Enemies?
I've not, no.
Okay. Are you familiar with, I think it was 1968, the debates on
Yeah.
ABC
Yeah.
between Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley? Have
Yeah.
you ever?
I know what you're
No,
talking
you
about.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That documentary was so cool to me, and it goes back to being in high school, talking with a guy who was a year or two older than me. I was an Obama guy, of course. He was a Bush guy, and we just have the most chill conversations, totally respectful.
Oh,
Yeah, of course, we were smoking weed, but we didn't get very deep into the policies, perhaps, but it was nice. And that documentary, except for during I think the 10th debate when it almost came to blows, up until that point they were very respectful and very cordial, and always so as much as it was about finding my political identity, which it is. I want to be a space where people can have those kind of conversations, and this
yeah.
has definitely been that. And so, thank you very much.
We'll have to do it again
Yeah,
sometime.
yeah. No, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for flexing with me with the
Of
schedule.
course. Of
Yeah.
course. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, Brianna. Appreciate you. Take care.